In the city of Aldergate, in a year with a number too large to feel real anymore, there is a building with no windows and no name on its door, and inside that building, a woman named Sable Fairarrow spends her days holding other people's lives in her hands. She is an archivist. Not the kind who catalogues books or bones, but the kind who catalogues minds. In this world, memory is not just a private thing you carry until you die and lose it forever. Memory can be drawn out of a dying brain like water from a well, cooled and stored in thin silver spindles the size of a fingernail, kept safe in vaults for families who cannot bear to lose every trace of the people they loved. It is not resurrection. Sable is careful never to call it that. It is preservation. A held breath kept in a jar so that grief has somewhere to visit. She has done this work for 19 years, and in that time she has extracted the memories of 4,012 people. She remembers the number exactly, though she remembers almost nothing else about her own life before the age of 26. This is not a coincidence, and it is not a secret, though it is something she has stopped mentioning at dinner tables. The machines that draw memory from the dying are not perfectly one-directional. Every extraction leaves a trace behind in the archivist doing the drawing, like sediment left on a riverbank after the water has moved on. 19 years of other people's goodbyes have quietly, patiently worn away at her own beginning. She cannot remember her mother's face without looking at a photograph. She cannot remember why she chose this profession in the first place. She has made her peace with this, the way people make peace with whether they cannot control, by simply deciding not to look up anymore. Tonight, she is called to the bedside of a man she has never met, in a hospice on the edge of the old harbour district, where the machines still hum against windows salted white with sea spray. His name is Anton de Lacroix, and he is 81 years old, and he is dying of something slow enough that he has had time to prepare, and unkind enough that he has stopped wanting to. His daughter sits by the bed, her eyes raw, and she signs the release forms with a hand that will not stop trembling, because somewhere inside this transaction is the unbearable arithmetic of losing a father twice, once when his body stops, and once again years later, if she ever chooses to sell the memories forward instead of keeping them. Sable begins the way she always begins. Gently. She places the crown of thin filaments against Anton's temples, and she tells him, as she tells everyone, that this will not hurt, that he will simply feel as though he is remembering very hard, the way you do when someone asks you to describe a house you grew up in and you find, to your own surprise, that you can still walk through every room. The extraction begins. Most memories come out the way rivers come out of mountains, winding, ordinary, full of small things nobody thought to treasure until they were the only things left. Anton's memories are full of a woman named Odalise, his wife, dead 11 years now, and a garden they kept behind a house that no longer exists, and an argument they once had about a color of paint that neither of them in the end could remember the resolution to, only the laughing after. Sable draws these out carefully, the way she has 10,000 times before, and she feels the old, familiar ache of borrowing a happiness that isn't hers, then giving it away to be stored, the way you might carry a stranger's suitcase through an airport and never open it. But partway through the extraction, something goes wrong, or perhaps something goes right in a way the machine was never built to allow. A memory surfaces that does not belong to Anton de Lacroix at all. It is a memory of a young woman standing in a laboratory much like the one Sable works in now, 20 years younger, her hair a different color, but her eyes unmistakably, impossibly her own. In the memory, this young woman is arguing with a man in a white coat. insisting that the extraction process is not as one-directional as the company claims, that something is being lost on the archivist side of the exchange with every session, and that someone needs to be told before more archivists spend their whole careers quietly forgetting themselves in service of other people's grief. Sable stops the machine. Her hands do not shake, because 19 years of discipline do not leave a person easily, but everything underneath the stillness is moving very fast indeed. She realizes in the space of a single suspended breath that Anton de Lacroix's did not always live in the harbor district. 20 years ago, before his memory ever touched hers, he worked in a lab, the same lab. And somewhere in the tangled architecture of a mind losing its grip on order, he has been carrying a fragment of her, a memory of her, protecting it the way a person might press a pressed flower into a book without remembering, years later, exactly why they saved it. She asks him very quietly whether he remembers a young researcher named Sable, who once tried to stop this technology before it left the lab. Anton's eyes, cloudy with medication and the slow tide of his own ending, focus on her the way a man focuses on the one clear thing in a fogged room. "You look different now," he says, "but it's the same fight in your face." Does not answer right away, because answering would mean admitting how much of the last 19 years she has spent doing the very thing her younger self begged someone to stop. He tells her in a voice thinned by illness but not by doubt, that they'd fired her the week after that argument, quietly, generously, with a severance and a signed agreement she does not remember signing, and that the company had gone on to build an entire industry out of the thing she'd warned them about. He tells her he never forgot her, not because his memory was extraordinary, but because guilt, unlike ordinary memory, does not erode. It calcifies. He kept a fragment of that argument in his mind for 20 years the way you keep a splinter you never dug out, and now in his last days it has surfaced on its own, unbidden, the body's last honest act before it stops being a body at all. Sable finishes the extraction because Anton's daughter is waiting, and because a promise made to the dying is not the kind you break for your own reckoning. She stores his ordinary, beautiful memories of Odalys and the garden and the argument about paint, exactly as she is meant to, but she does not store the fragment of herself she finds tangled inside them. That she keeps. For the first time in 19 years, she takes something out of this room instead of only giving something away. Walking home along the harbor afterward, the salt wind moving through streets that do not yet know what she now knows, Sable understands that she has spent nearly 2 decades perfecting the art of holding on to other people's beginnings while her own quietly dissolved, unremarked, into the machinery of her work. She does not know yet whether she will go public with what Anton showed her, whether she will find the company's old records, whether she will ever fully recover the 26 years of herself the archive work slowly wore away. But she knows, walking home with a stranger's stored kindness and her own unstolen fragment both inside her, that forgetting is not the same as disappearing. Somewhere in someone else's memory, in someone else's kept splinter, we are all being carried a little longer than we think. She reaches her apartment, sits at the small table by the window, and for the first time in longer than she can measure, she does not reach for a photograph to remember her mother's face. She simply closes her eyes and tries on her own to remember.